The sun dipped low over the small town of Red Mesa, casting long golden shadows across the dusty streets, and the townsfolk whispered among themselves as a young woman named Clara hurried along the wooden boardwalk, her hands clutching the folds of her simple dress, her heart racing with anxiety and shame. She had been the center of gossip since the arrival of the traveling merchant, rumors that threatened her reputation and the future of her family. She moved quickly past the shops and saloons, her eyes darting nervously toward the faces that followed her with judgment and curiosity. The church bell tolled in the distance, marking the hour, and Clara knew she had to reach her home before nightfall. The wind blew dust into her hair, and along the deserted street she took shallow breaths, trying to steady the turmoil of her mind. The events of the past days had been relentless, each whispered accusation cutting sharper than the last, leaving her exhausted and fearful of what might come next. She felt trapped between the fear of scandal and the desire to escape the scrutiny of the town. As she turned the corner toward her small wooden house, a tall figure appeared, blocking her path. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a long dust-stained coat, his eyes hidden behind the brim, yet his presence carried authority and confidence. Clara froze, her heart pounding in her chest, unsure of whether this was another threat or a miracle sent by fate. The man lifted his head, revealing piercing blue eyes that held a mixture of determination and understanding. "I am here to help, Clara," he said in a voice low yet commanding, and she felt a flicker of hope that perhaps someone could intervene and protect her from the relentless judgment. She looked at him uncertainly, her lips pressed tightly together, and he stepped closer, his posture firm yet non-threatening. "My name is Luke, and I will marry you to protect your name, to save your family, and to ensure no one can harm you further." Clara shook her head in disbelief, the words crashing over her like a wave of impossibility. Why would anyone offer such a sacrifice, she wondered, and yet the sincerity in his gaze and the quiet authority in his tone left her little room to refuse. She understood instinctively that the townsfolk would respect a marriage even if hastily arranged, and that this offer was her only chance to escape ruin. She looked at the sky as the last light of the sun disappeared and realized that her choice was no longer between what she wanted but between survival and despair. Luke extended his hand, and Clara hesitated only for a moment before placing her trembling hand in his. She felt the strength in his grip, the steady warmth, and the unspoken promise of protection, and the world around her seemed to still, as if acknowledging the magnitude of the decision. She followed him through the streets, the townsfolk watching silently, their whispers fading into the distance as the couple moved toward the small chapel at the edge of town. The chapel doors creaked open and the interior smelled of old wood and candle wax. The minister awaited them, his expression solemn yet understanding, for he had known the stories and the necessity of the union. The ceremony was brief and quiet, with only the barest witnesses, yet the weight of the vows was immense, and Clara felt the strange mixture of relief, fear, and curiosity stirring in her heart as the words were spoken, and Luke placed the ring on her finger. Outside, the wind stirred the dust along the streets and the shadows of the evening deepened. Clara looked at Luke and saw in his eyes a quiet promise, not of love yet not of indifference, but of protection, a vow to honor her and safeguard her dignity even as the world around them whispered judgment and curiosity. She felt her pulse steady slightly, knowing that her life had changed irrevocably and that the path ahead would be unpredictable, full of challenges and perhaps moments of unexpected warmth and connection. As they stepped out of the chapel, the stars began to appear faintly in the darkening sky, and the first chapter of a story neither of them had anticipated began to unfold. The town remained quiet for a moment, as if holding its breath, acknowledging the union that had saved a reputation and set the stage for love that had yet to awaken. Yet within the hearts of both Clara and Luke a subtle spark flickered, hinting at the possibility that what began as duty might grow into something far more profound and enduring than either could imagine. The sun rose slowly over the hills of Red Mesa, casting a warm glow across the small wooden house that Clara now called home. She stood on the porch, clutching a simple cloth in her hands, and gazed at the dusty streets below, where the town began to stir again after the long night of whispers and speculation. Her mind was a whirl of emotions: relief at surviving the scandal, fear at the uncertainty of the future, and curiosity about the man who had married her to protect her reputation. Luke moved quietly inside the house, arranging a few items on the table and adjusting the placement of the chairs. He worked with deliberate care, his movements calm and measured, as if every gesture carried a meaning of stability and reassurance. Clara watched him from the doorway, her fingers tightening around the cloth as she tried to steady her racing thoughts. She had spent countless nights imagining the worst, the relentless gossip, the shame that could crush her spirit, and now she stood in a house filled with silence and possibility. The interior of the home was modest but clean. The wooden floors polished, the small fireplace ready for kindling, and the windows letting in the golden morning light that softened the edges of the small furniture and cast long shadows across the walls. Luke glanced at Clara and offered a quiet smile, a reassurance without words that they would adjust together, that this temporary solution would provide both safety and a fragile sense of peace. Clara stepped inside and placed the cloth on the table, brushing dust from her hands. She glanced around the room, taking in the simplicity of the space and feeling the first stirrings of ownership and responsibility. She realized that while this marriage had been a solution to a scandal, it also brought her a chance to create a new chapter in her life, a space free from judgment where she could breathe and think clearly and perhaps even begin to hope. Luke approached and handed her a small bundle of linens, his hands brushing hers briefly, the contact warm and grounding. She looked up into his eyes, seeing a mixture of seriousness and care, a quiet determination to ensure that this arrangement would succeed in protecting her while also respecting her dignity. They exchanged no words for a moment, allowing the silence to carry a subtle understanding that both recognized the delicate balance between duty and the unspoken possibilities of connection. Outside, the wind stirred the trees lining the property and carried faint sounds from the town, the clip of hooves on the main street, the chatter of children, and the distant toll of the church bell marking the hour. Clara inhaled deeply the scent of fresh earth and sun-warmed wood, letting it fill her lungs and settle her mind. She realized that the house was more than shelter. It was a beginning, a space where she could reclaim her life from the shadow of scandal and slowly rebuild her confidence and sense of self. Luke moved toward the fireplace, placing small pieces of wood inside and striking a match to ignite the kindling. The fire caught quickly, spreading warmth and light throughout the room, and Clara felt a wave of comfort wash over her. She understood that while the world outside still whispered her story, within these walls she was safe and protected, and the rhythm of daily life could begin to soothe the wounds left by gossip and fear. They prepared a simple breakfast together, Luke fetching water from the small pump outside and Clara arranging bread and fruit on the table. Their movements were careful and deliberate, a quiet dance of cooperation and tentative trust. The room filled with the aroma of cooking and the soft crackle of the fire, and Clara felt a sense of normalcy returning despite the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. She smiled briefly at Luke and he returned it with a small nod, acknowledging the shared understanding of their current situation. As the day progressed, they began to unpack a few belongings, the small trinkets and keepsakes that Clara had brought with her, the photographs of family and friends, and the simple mementos that carried memories of happier times. Each item found its place on the shelves or mantel, and with every gesture Clara felt a sense of control returning, a reassurance that despite the scandal she had survived and could thrive within this new chapter of her life. By afternoon, the sun was high and warm, and Clara and Luke stood together on the porch overlooking the fields beyond the town. She felt the warmth on her face and the steady presence of Luke beside her, and understood fully that while this marriage had begun as protection and duty, it held the subtle potential for trust, companionship, and perhaps something more. She breathed in the air carrying dust and sunlight, and for the first time in months felt the quiet flicker of hope within her heart. The day ended with a calm sky painted in pink and orange hues and the promise of tomorrow stretching beyond the horizon. Clara sat by the fire inside the house, feeling the warmth on her skin and the weight of uncertainty lifted slightly. She glanced at Luke, and for a moment the walls of duty fell away, leaving two people in a quiet understanding, the beginning of a life together where love might grow from unexpected roots, and the house became not just a shelter but the first home of a future full of possibilities. The days passed slowly in the small wooden house at the edge of Red Mesa, with the sun rising over the hills and spilling warm light across the dusty streets. Clara began to feel a sense of rhythm in her life, a quiet steadiness that had been absent during the chaos of scandal and hurried marriage. She rose early each morning to fetch water from the well, to prepare simple meals, and to sweep the floor, her hands moving with purpose as if each task stitched a thread of control back into her life. Luke joined her in the mornings, carrying firewood or tending to small repairs around the house. His presence was constant yet unobtrusive, a steady shadow that followed her movements without imposing or demanding recognition. Clara began to notice the subtle kindnesses, the way he adjusted a chair so she would not stoop, the careful placement of tools where they could be easily reached, and the quiet patience in his eyes as he listened to her observations about the house or the town. At first they spoke little, exchanging only necessary words about food, water, repairs, and the chores that maintained the home, yet over time conversation began to flow more freely. The discussions started with practical matters but gradually expanded to the stories of their lives, to small reminiscences of childhood moments, to memories of the town and the surrounding countryside. They laughed softly at shared observations, the sound carrying warmth through the small rooms and settling into the corners like sunlight through the windows. Clara found herself observing Luke more closely, the curve of his jaw, the steady line of his shoulders, the way his hands moved with skill and purpose. She noticed the gentleness in his eyes and the thoughtfulness behind his actions. She realized that beneath the strong exterior there was a man shaped by years of responsibility and quiet reflection, and she began to trust him not merely as a protector but as a companion whose presence brought a sense of safety and calm to her heart. Luke, on his part, watched Clara with increasing attentiveness, noticing her resilience, her courage, and the gentle grace with which she moved through each day. He admired the way she handled tasks and the subtle intelligence in her observations about the world around them. The initial sense of duty that had brought them together began to shift into a quiet admiration, a recognition that this woman was more than a symbol of reputation. She was a person of depth, strength, and quiet beauty. Meals together became moments of connection, the simple act of sharing food transforming into conversation and laughter. Clara would recount small anecdotes from her childhood or her memories of the town, while Luke would tell of his experiences on the ranch, the work he had done and the people he had known. Each story revealed character, each smile and glance built understanding, and slowly the bond between them deepened, becoming a bridge between the practical obligations of their marriage and the unspoken potential for affection. Evenings were spent by the fire, the crackle of the flames echoing in the small house and providing comfort and warmth. Clara would sit with a blanket draped across her shoulders, and Luke would read aloud from a small book or recount tales of the surrounding countryside. They sat close enough for the heat to be shared, yet distant enough to respect the boundaries that had been necessary at the beginning of their unusual union. Each night, Clara felt her heart swell with a mixture of gratitude, curiosity, and the faintest spark of something she had never expected to feel. Outside, the wind moved through the trees and carried the faint sounds of the town, the clip of horses' hooves, the distant laughter of children, and the occasional call of a merchant. Yet within the house the world felt contained and safe, a space where trust could grow without interference or judgment. Each day the bond strengthened through acts of consideration, through shared tasks, and the quiet presence of each other in ordinary moments that slowly became extraordinary. As the sun rose higher and cast long shadows across the floor, Clara realized that her fear and anxiety were diminishing, replaced by a sense of anticipation and curiosity about the days to come. She felt a subtle thrill when Luke entered the room bringing firewood or water, or simply a smile, and began to understand that the man who had married her out of duty might become someone she could care for deeply. Luke noticed too the changes in Clara, her posture more confident, her smile more frequent, her laughter lighter and freer, and he felt a quiet warmth in his chest, recognizing that the connection between them was shifting from obligation to companionship, to something far more complex and tender. The bond they were forming was not born of romance alone, but of shared experiences, patience, and the gradual unfolding of understanding. By the end of the week, the house felt less like a shelter from scandal and more like a home, a place where trust and respect could coexist alongside affection and curiosity. Each glance, each gesture, each shared moment wove threads into a fabric of connection, and both Clara and Luke felt the subtle transformation that marked the beginning of a relationship built on shared respect, evolving into the tender stirrings of love. The sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Clara sat on the porch watching the changing colors with a quiet contentment. She knew the days ahead would continue to test them, yet she also knew that the bond they had formed would provide the foundation for facing challenges together and perhaps discovering a love that had been waiting quietly in the spaces between duty and destiny. The morning light streamed through the windows of the small wooden house, illuminating the floorboards and casting warm golden rays across the room. Clara moved quietly, preparing breakfast, her hands steady yet her heart fluttering with a strange mix of anticipation and curiosity. She had begun to notice subtle changes in her feelings toward Luke, the man who had married her out of duty, yet whose presence now filled her thoughts more often than she had expected. Luke entered the room carrying a bundle of fresh firewood. His movements calm and deliberate, he placed the wood beside the fireplace and glanced at Clara, his eyes soft yet attentive. She felt a brief flutter in her chest at the look he gave her, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips that she quickly tried to suppress. The ordinary moment of sharing morning light and household tasks began to feel charged with unspoken emotion, a subtle awareness of connection that had not been there before. They moved together through the morning routines, Luke tending to repairs outside and Clara arranging food and cleaning the kitchen, yet every glance, every brush of a hand across a surface carried an unspoken acknowledgement of the bond that was deepening. The days of survival and duty had shifted into moments of shared presence where trust and familiarity began to grow and the possibility of something more lingered in the air. At mid-morning, Luke brought a basket of freshly gathered fruits from the nearby grove and set it on the table. His hands brushed against hers briefly, and a warmth spread through Clara that she could not ignore. She looked up at him, catching the briefest hint of a smile, and realized that she had begun to notice him in ways that went beyond gratitude and respect. Her heart beat faster at his nearness, at the sound of his voice, and at the calm reassurance in his gaze. They sat together at the table eating breakfast, the silence comfortable yet filled with subtle tension. Clara spoke softly about the town, about memories of her childhood, and about small dreams she had once held for a future she had imagined before scandal had struck. Luke listened attentively, nodding, occasionally offering gentle observations and quiet laughter that made her feel seen and valued in a way she had not experienced before. The ordinary act of conversation began to feel like the weaving of a deeper connection. Later in the afternoon, Clara found herself near the river carrying a small bundle of laundry she had washed early that morning. The breeze played with her hair and the sunlight glinted off the water, and she felt a sudden thrill of anticipation. Luke approached quietly from behind a small bend in the path, carrying a small fishing rod he had intended to use to catch their supper. Clara turned and smiled at him, the gesture natural yet her pulse quickening at the sight of him so near and so familiar. They walked together along the riverbank, talking about the simple joys of the countryside, the patterns of the river, and the shapes of the clouds above. Yet beneath the words lay the unspoken awareness of each other's presence, the subtle sparks of attraction that had begun to flicker within the quiet moments shared in trust and understanding. Clara noticed the way Luke's eyes followed her movements, the careful attention in his gestures, and the warmth that seemed to radiate from him without intention or demand. As the sun lowered behind the hills, casting long shadows across the river, the first real spark ignited in their hearts, a gentle stirring that neither fully understood nor could yet name. It was not the fire of sudden passion, but a quiet recognition that the bond they had formed through shared survival and care had begun to blossom into something tender and profound. The ordinary tasks of daily life had become infused with meaning, and the presence of the other carried a subtle electricity that made the day feel alive. They returned to the house as the sky turned pink and orange with the setting sun, Luke lighting the fireplace and Clara arranging the small furnishings for the evening. The room was warm and filled with the comforting sense of wood and fire and simple food, and Clara felt a quiet awareness of Luke's nearness that made her heartbeat quicken yet also settle with a strange sense of calm. That night, as they sat by the fire, the first words of deeper conversation emerged, words that hinted at dreams, hopes, and vulnerabilities previously unspoken. Clara looked into Luke's eyes and felt the spark grow, a sense of connection that was more than friendship, more than duty, and yet grounded in the trust and respect that had carried them through the first days of their union. The glow of the fire reflected in his eyes and mirrored the faint warmth stirring in her own chest. As the stars appeared above Red Mesa, the house settled into quiet, the wind whispering through the trees and the distant sounds of the town fading into the night. Clara realized that the first spark had been lit, and that in the ordinary rhythms of daily life she had begun to care for Luke in ways she could not yet fully name or understand. Yet the feeling was undeniable and filled her with a mixture of excitement, wonder, and anticipation for the days to come. The night closed softly around the house, the river reflecting the light of the moon and the willow trees swaying gently in the breeze. Clara sat quietly reflecting on the day, the small moments of laughter, the touches that lingered a fraction too long, and the warmth in Luke's eyes. She understood that the spark was just the beginning, a subtle unfolding that might grow into love built on trust, patience, and the shared experiences of ordinary life that had become extraordinary in their quiet intimacy. The sky over Red Mesa glowed with the soft colors of twilight, painting shades of lavender, pink and gold across the hills and the small wooden house. Clara stepped onto the porch carrying a small basket of herbs she had gathered from the garden, her fingers brushing against the delicate leaves as she inhaled the scent of earth and sunlight lingering in the air. She paused for a moment, letting the cool evening breeze brush against her face and listening to the quiet hum of the town settling into the night. Luke emerged from the shadows of the house, his silhouette tall and steady against the fading light. He carried a small lantern that cast a warm glow over the porch and the steps leading down to the garden. Clara felt a gentle flutter in her chest as their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement passing between them that neither had spoken aloud, yet both had understood. For some time their bond had grown slowly through shared tasks, laughter and quiet moments of trust, but now the evening seemed to invite a deeper honesty, a willingness to reveal the heart. He approached her with measured steps and set the lantern down on the table beside them, casting a soft light that danced across the wooden boards. Clara felt the warmth of its glow mirrored in the rising pulse within her. She spoke first, breaking the comfortable silence, and her voice was quiet yet steady. "I have never felt so understood before," she said, and looked at him, her eyes searching for a sign of reciprocation. Luke's expression softened, his lips curving in the faintest hint of a smile, and he reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. Clara shivered slightly at the touch, and her hand instinctively moved to cover his. She did not pull away, but let the warmth linger, a silent invitation for him to remain close. The wind stirred the leaves of the nearby willow tree, and the faint rustle carried through the night as if the world itself was acknowledging the significance of this moment. Luke took a slow breath and spoke in a voice low and steady that seemed to harmonize with the quiet evening. "I did not expect to feel this way when I offered to marry you," he said, "but now I cannot imagine my days without your presence." Her heart skipped a beat at his words, and she felt a rush of relief and wonder mingled with the faintest tinge of fear. For years she had faced judgment and uncertainty, and now here was a man whose duty had turned into genuine feeling, a love that had grown silently in the spaces between chores, conversations, and shared moments of quiet reflection. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but smiled gently, feeling a surge of gratitude and hope. Clara took a tentative step closer, the soft glow of the lantern illuminating her face and the subtle warmth of her breath mingling with the cool evening air. "I never imagined I would feel safe and cared for like this," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly with emotion but firm in its truth. Luke reached out, taking both her hands in his grip steady, comforting and reassuring, and a warmth spread through her chest that made her knees feel lighter. The evening settled around them, the town quiet, the stars beginning to twinkle in the deepening sky, and the river beyond the hills glinting faintly with the last light of the day. Their confessions continued in soft murmurs, words flowing from heart to heart, revealing the hopes, fears, and dreams they had hidden from themselves and from the world. The trust they had built over days of shared life now allowed them to speak honestly and openly, a quiet understanding that the bond between them had shifted into something undeniable, tender and real. They moved closer together, sitting on the edge of the porch side by side, their shoulders brushing and hands entwined. Their laughter mingled with the rustling leaves and the distant call of a night bird, a gentle harmony that marked the beginning of a love neither had anticipated yet both welcomed with open hearts. Clara rested her head against Luke's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart and the warmth of his presence, a reassurance that love could grow from duty into something pure and profound. The lantern flickered gently in the evening breeze, and the shadows danced across the porch boards as they spoke of the future hopes they held and the small dreams they might pursue together. They understood fully that the road ahead would hold challenges, responsibilities, and obstacles, yet the bond formed in trust and shared moments of vulnerability would guide them and strengthen their connection. As darkness settled over Red Mesa, the stars shone brighter above the hills, and Clara felt a sense of peace and anticipation, a quiet knowledge that the confessions shared in the twilight had marked the beginning of a love that would endure through seasons, hardships, and joy. The first spark had ignited, now fully kindled into a flame of tender devotion that promised warmth, companionship, and the possibility of a future shaped together. The sun sank low over Red Mesa, casting long shadows across the small wooden house and the fields beyond. Clara stood at the edge of the porch, her heart fluttering with anticipation and a quiet nervousness. She held a basket of freshly picked flowers, her fingers brushing over the petals as the wind lifted strands of her hair across her face. She felt the gentle pull of the evening, the warmth of the fading sun, and the presence of Luke standing near the doorway, a silent strength that drew her attention and held it. Luke approached slowly, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken yet also settled her spirit. His footsteps were measured, deliberate, each one carrying the weight of intention and care. He reached her side and paused, giving her space yet closing the distance just enough that the proximity sparked a warmth that rose through Clara from her chest to her cheeks. She looked up into his eyes, searching for meaning, reassurance, and permission. The air between them seemed to thrum with unspoken emotion, a mixture of tenderness, curiosity, and desire that neither had dared voice before. The soft rustling of the willow tree in the nearby garden and the distant sound of the river flowing created a natural rhythm to their moment, a gentle harmony that made the world fade around them, leaving only the two of them suspended in anticipation. Clara felt her breath catch as Luke extended his hand, slowly brushing a lock of hair from her face. She did not pull away, instead letting his fingers linger, the subtle warmth of contact sending a shiver through her and awakening feelings she had only begun to recognize. Luke's gaze softened, the sharp edges of his eyes now filled with tenderness and quiet longing, a reflection of the emotions stirring in Clara's heart. They moved together without haste, the space between them shrinking gradually with each heartbeat until the distance was almost imperceptible. Clara's hands found his shoulders, resting lightly as she felt the steady strength beneath her fingertips. She sensed the careful control Luke exercised to remain respectful yet close, and her own hesitation melted into a gentle trust, a surrender to the unspoken invitation to connect more deeply. Their eyes met one last time in silent acknowledgement and shared understanding before he leaned slightly forward, the motion slow, deliberate, and tender. Their lips met softly, at first tentative and gentle like the brushing of a feather across the skin, a quiet exploration of the emotions that had been building over days of shared life, conversation, and small acts of care. The world seemed to hold its breath, the colors of sunset fading into twilight and the stars beginning to twinkle above Red Mesa, as if marking the significance of the moment. The kiss deepened subtly, carrying the promise of affection, warmth, and an emerging love that had been quietly growing in the spaces between duty and companionship. Clara felt a wave of relief, wonder, and exhilaration mingling within her heart. Her hands rested lightly on Luke's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart and the warmth that radiated from him. She realized fully that the man who had married her out of duty had become someone she cared for deeply, whose presence brought comfort, joy, and a sense of belonging that she had not known in years. Luke pulled back slightly, resting his forehead against hers, his breath mingling with hers, the lantern casting a warm glow on their faces, illuminating the subtle smiles and the lingering spark in their eyes. The bond between them had shifted completely from obligation to tender affection and desire, a recognition that love had grown quietly and unexpectedly in the midst of ordinary days and shared responsibilities. They stood together in the twilight, the soft rustle of leaves and the distant river creating a natural symphony that marked the beginning of a new chapter. Their hands remained intertwined, shoulders brushing and hearts aligned in a quiet celebration of trust, intimacy, and connection that had taken root slowly but now flourished fully. The first kiss had ignited a flame of passion and tenderness that promised warmth, companionship, and a deepening of the bond that had begun in duty and now blossomed into genuine love. The night settled over Red Mesa, the stars glimmering above and the house filled with the quiet peace of understanding and acceptance. Clara felt a flutter of joy in her chest, a sense of completeness that had been absent for years, and the subtle thrill of anticipation for the days to come. Luke smiled softly at her, a reflection of the same emotions, and together they embraced the promise of a love that had grown from unexpected beginnings into something real, enduring, and profound. The morning light crept over the hills of Red Mesa, illuminating the small wooden house with soft golden rays. Clara moved through the rooms carrying baskets of freshly washed clothes and supplies from the town, her mind restless with thoughts she could not yet voice. Luke tended to the small repairs around the house, his hands steady and sure, yet his brow furrowed slightly as if sensing the tension in the air. The calm of their days together was being tested by whispers from town and the arrival of visitors carrying questions that Clara had hoped to avoid. A wagon rolled slowly up the dusty road, bringing with it the distant voices of townsfolk carrying news and speculation. Clara paused on the porch, her heart tightening as she saw familiar faces approaching the house, curiosity written across every expression. The quiet peace she had begun to enjoy felt threatened by the scrutiny of the world beyond the walls of their home. The scandal that had once driven her into Luke's protection had not faded completely, and the small town continued to cast shadows of doubt and opinion over their lives. Luke noticed her hesitation and stepped close, offering a steady presence that was both comforting and protective. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder and spoke softly, reassuringly. "We will face this together," he said, his voice firm yet gentle, and Clara felt the warmth of his words calm her nerves just enough to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. The approaching wagon and the murmurs of the townsfolk could not undo the bond they had forged nor diminish the feelings quietly growing between them. The visitors arrived at the porch, a small group of town leaders and neighbors, their expressions polite yet inquisitive. They spoke carefully, inquiring about Clara's well-being and the circumstances of her sudden marriage to Luke. Their words carried a mixture of concern and judgment, probing for answers that neither wanted to give, but Luke's presence provided a shield of calm authority and respect that tempered their questioning and reassured Clara in ways words could not. As the conversation continued, Clara began to feel the first flickers of tension arise, a nervous energy that had not existed before. She realized that the world outside the house would always seek to impose its opinions and expectations, yet within the walls of their home she had found safety, trust, and companionship. She focused on Luke's steady gaze and the reassurance in his posture, and felt a sense of determination rising within her to face the challenges together rather than retreat in fear. The day wore on, with small tasks providing distraction from the growing unease, the preparation of meals, tending the garden, and small repairs around the property, creating a rhythm that reminded them of the stability they had built together. Yet each sound from the road, each passing figure cast shadows across their sense of peace, and Clara became increasingly aware of the need to confront the external pressures that threatened to disrupt their quiet lives and the delicate balance of trust and affection they had nurtured. By mid-afternoon, the sun blazed high and the wind carried dust through the trees and across the fields. The visitors left, leaving behind a quiet tension and subtle unease. Clara stood by the river edge, taking deep breaths and letting the sound of flowing water soothe her troubled mind. She thought of the first spark, the gentle moments, and the first kiss that had ignited warmth in her heart, and realized that while challenges would arise, the bond she shared with Luke provided a foundation strong enough to withstand scrutiny and adversity. Luke joined her at the riverbank, carrying a small bundle of fishing supplies, his eyes meeting hers with quiet understanding and determination. The silence between them was comfortable yet charged with awareness, each recognizing the obstacles that lay beyond the safety of the house and the fields, yet trusting in their growing connection to navigate the difficulties ahead. Together they moved along the river, the soft sound of water and the rustling of leaves offering solace and a reminder that the world outside was not as powerful as the trust and affection they cultivated within their own space. Evening descended slowly, painting the sky with soft pink and purple hues. Clara and Luke returned to the house, tending to chores and small preparations for the night, yet their hearts carried the knowledge that challenges were inevitable, that the world outside continued to test their strength and resilience. They spoke little, but their hands brushed, their eyes met, and the warmth of each other's presence reminded them that adversity could be faced and overcome when trust and love were shared. As the stars appeared over Red Mesa and the wind stirred the leaves of the willow tree, the couple sat quietly together, the house filled with the comforting glow of the fire and the sense of quiet determination that had grown between them. They understood that the days ahead would bring further challenges, moments of doubt, and tests of courage, yet they also knew that their bond had been forged through trust, patience, and affection, a bond that would endure beyond the scrutiny of townsfolk and the pressures of circumstance. Clara rested her head against Luke's shoulder, feeling the steady warmth of his body and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She understood fully that challenges were part of life, that obstacles would always arise, and that the path of love required strength, patience, and commitment. Yet the fire between them was resilient, the trust profound, and the connection unbreakable, and together they were ready to face whatever trials awaited them in the days to come. The sky over Red Mesa darkened with heavy clouds, the wind stirring the trees and carrying the scent of impending rain. Clara stood near the garden, gathering the last of the herbs for the day, her dress clinging lightly to her as the first drops began to fall. She looked up at the sky and felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with nervousness, knowing that Luke was approaching across the field, his figure steady yet urgent against the gray backdrop of the storm. He reached her just as the rain began to fall heavier, drenching the soil and soaking their clothing. In moments the world around them became blurred with motion and water droplets, yet the intensity of the moment heightened the awareness of each other's presence. Luke took her hands gently in his palms warm against the cool dampness of her skin, and his eyes locked onto hers with an unwavering seriousness that made her heart race. Clara shivered at the cold rain and the sudden proximity of Luke, yet the warmth of his hands and the intensity of his gaze held her steady. She knew this was a moment of revelation, a crossing of boundaries from silent affection to spoken truth, and the storm around them mirrored the turbulence of emotions within her own chest. Luke spoke first, his voice low, yet carrying over the sound of the rain. "I need to tell you something," he said, and Clara felt her breath catch, her pulse quicken, and her heart lift slightly as she waited for the confession. "I did not expect to fall for you," he continued, each word deliberate, steady, and full of sincerity, yet tinged with vulnerability, the rain falling in sheets around them, making the world seem isolated and private in a way that amplified the intimacy of the moment. Clara's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise, relief, and a dawning joy filling her chest as she realized the depth of the feeling that had been growing quietly between them for weeks. She felt tears mingle with the rain on her cheeks as the words settled in her heart. She reached up, gently touching his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw and feeling the warmth beneath the cool droplets. The world seemed to shrink until only the two of them existed, standing in the storm, the wind whipping around them, the earth wet and soft beneath their feet, and the rain washing away the distance and hesitation that had lingered for so long. Clara spoke softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I feel the same way," she admitted, the words barely audible above the storm, yet carrying the full weight of truth and vulnerability. Luke smiled faintly, relief and joy shining in his eyes, and leaned closer, brushing his forehead against hers, the contact grounding and exhilarating at once. They stood together in the rain, the storm no longer frightening or oppressive, but a backdrop for honesty and connection, the drops mingling with their laughter and tears, creating a rhythm of intimacy that was both powerful and gentle. Clara felt her chest lift with the realization that love had fully arrived, that the man who had married her to save her reputation now loved her genuinely and deeply. The rain soaked their clothing, yet they did not move to shelter themselves, the storm creating a private space where confessions could be made, where fears could be shared, and where the bond between them was sealed by truth and trust. Luke took a deep breath and whispered words that made her heart swell. "I want to be with you, not because of duty, but because I love you." Clara's smile widened, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks, and she rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady warmth and the certainty of his feelings. They walked slowly back to the house, hands intertwined, their clothing soaked yet irrelevant in the face of the emotional warmth that now radiated between them. Each step seemed lighter, each glance shared a reminder that the connection they had forged through shared experiences, moments of quiet reflection, and the first sparks of affection had now deepened into a commitment of heart and soul. The storm had become a witness to their love, a symbol of cleansing and renewal. By the time they reached the porch, the rain had softened the world into a gentle drizzle, and the evening light painted a muted glow across the wet landscape. Clara and Luke paused a moment, gazing at the softened hills and the river glinting in the dim light. The confession in the rain had changed everything, a silent acknowledgement that what began in duty had blossomed into genuine love that would guide them through challenges, fears, and joys to come. The fire they lit in the fireplace that evening cast flickering light across the walls and warmed their wet bodies, yet the greater warmth came from the knowledge that their hearts had spoken honestly and openly, and that the love between them was now undeniable, a quiet fire burning brighter than any hearth and illuminating a path forward filled with trust, intimacy, and the promise of a shared life built on both courage and affection. The morning sun rose over Red Mesa, casting soft golden light across the small wooden house and the surrounding fields. Clara stood on the porch, her hands resting lightly on the railing, gazing out at the hills and the distant river. Her mind was filled with thoughts of the past weeks, the confessions, the first kiss, the storm, the bond that had grown between her and Luke, and the realization that their connection had evolved into something far deeper than either had expected. Luke approached quietly, carrying a bundle of freshly cut firewood, his movements calm and deliberate, yet there was a subtle energy in his steps, a quiet determination that mirrored the thoughts running through Clara's mind. He stopped beside her, and for a moment they simply looked at the horizon, the silence between them comfortable and filled with shared understanding of what had passed and what was to come. Clara spoke first, her voice soft yet steady. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what comes next, about what we want and how we will face the world outside these walls." Luke nodded, his gaze still on the horizon, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "It is time," he said. "We cannot let fear or gossip dictate our lives. We must choose the path we want together and live it fully, without hesitation or regret." They moved down the steps into the garden, the earth soft beneath their feet from the recent rain and the scent of wet soil and blooming flowers filling the air. Clara felt a lightness in her chest, a quiet joy mingled with anticipation as they discussed the life they wished to build, the simple pleasures they wanted to enjoy, the responsibilities they would share, and the moments of intimacy they would nurture in quiet corners of their home. The conversation flowed easily, each idea building upon the next, a collaborative vision for the future. Luke spoke of expanding the house, of planting more crops, of taking care of the animals and ensuring the property was safe and productive. Clara added thoughts of decorating the interior of the house, of creating spaces for books and memories, of shared meals and quiet evenings by the fire. Their voices intertwined with laughter and gentle teasing, their gestures light and natural, and the atmosphere around them seemed to hum with the energy of mutual commitment and hope. By midday they had finished chores around the property, tending to animals, fixing small repairs, and preparing a simple meal together, each act ordinary yet now infused with meaning, every glance and touch a reaffirmation of the bond that had grown steadily from duty into affection into love. Clara felt a quiet thrill in her chest as she realized that they were building not just a house but a home, a life that reflected both their individual desires and their shared vision. As afternoon descended, the sun casting long shadows across the fields, Clara and Luke walked along the river, their hands intertwined, the water reflecting light and movement like a living ribbon winding through their lives. They spoke of dreams, of travel, of visiting distant towns, of meeting people they had only heard of, and of the small ways they would support one another through challenges that lay ahead. Each word carried the promise of partnership, respect, and love that had been nurtured over weeks of trust and shared experience. Evening fell and the sky glowed in soft hues of orange, pink, and purple. Clara and Luke returned to the porch, sitting side by side watching the distant hills bathed in fading light. They spoke little now, letting the presence of each other convey the depth of their feelings. The first spark had become flame, the confession in the rain had solidified their bond, and now the conscious choice to face the future together completed the transformation of their relationship from obligation into authentic partnership. Clara rested her head on Luke's shoulder, feeling the warmth and strength of his body, the rhythm of his heartbeat aligning with her own. She knew that life would not always be simple, that challenges would continue to appear, yet the foundation they had built through honesty, trust, and shared experiences would sustain them through hardships, joys, and the ordinary moments that defined a life together. The stars appeared over Red Mesa and the night settled softly around the house and fields. The couple remained on the porch, wrapped in quiet understanding and the subtle exhilaration of choosing the future together. Each breath, each glance, each touch a silent promise that the days ahead would be faced side by side, a life crafted deliberately with love, patience, and courage guiding every step. They understood fully that choosing the future was more than decision, it was a commitment to build a shared life unshaken by fear or doubt, and to embrace the unfolding days with hearts aligned and hope unwavering. The morning sun rose over Red Mesa, casting warm golden light across the small wooden house and the fields beyond. Clara stirred quietly in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, the smell of freshly baked bread mingling with the earthy scent of herbs and flowers. Luke moved through the house, tending to small chores, his movements calm and deliberate, yet carrying an ease and confidence that came from knowing he was building a life with someone he truly cared for. They ate together on the porch, the morning light soft against their skin and the gentle breeze carrying the distant sounds of the town to their ears. Yet within the walls of their home all was quiet and serene, a space that belonged to them alone, where trust, affection, and love had taken root. Clara looked across the table at Luke, noticing the subtle curve of his lips, the warmth in his eyes, and the steady strength in his hands, and felt a deep sense of gratitude and joy. The days passed in a rhythm both ordinary and extraordinary, filled with small acts of care, laughter, and shared work, tending the animals, preparing meals, repairing fences, and maintaining the house, each task infused with meaning, each glance and touch carrying the reassurance of presence and partnership. Clara found herself smiling more often, her heart lighter and her spirit freer than it had been in years. The weight of fear, scandal, and doubt had lifted, replaced by the gentle certainty of love and companionship. Luke spent time in the fields planning improvements, discussing crops, and working alongside neighbors, yet he returned each evening to the porch to share quiet conversation and the comfort of Clara's presence. Their bond strengthened daily by shared experience, respect, and the unspoken understanding that they were building something lasting together. They spoke of dreams, both small and grand, of places to visit and of ways to create a life filled with warmth, safety, and joy. Evenings were marked by the glow of the fire, the crackle of wood, and the soft murmur of conversation. Clara would recount memories of childhood, stories of friends she had loved and lost, and Luke would listen attentively, sharing tales of his own past adventures and quiet reflections on the land and the town. Their laughter mingled with the wind and the night sounds, creating a symphony of intimacy and contentment that filled the house with warmth and light. The seasons changed, the sun rising and setting over Red Mesa, casting light and shadow over the fields and the house, and through it all the bond between Clara and Luke deepened. They faced challenges, storms, illness, and occasional gossip from the town, yet each obstacle was met with patience, understanding, and the steady commitment to one another that had grown from duty into affection, into love. They learned to navigate hardship together, to support and comfort each other, to celebrate small victories, and to embrace the ordinary joys of daily life. Clara tended the garden with care, planting flowers and vegetables that provided nourishment, beauty, and purpose. Luke repaired fences, built new structures, and ensured their home was safe and comfortable, yet each action was informed by consideration for the other, a reflection of the trust and respect that formed the foundation of their life together. The simple acts of living became expressions of devotion, their daily routines weaving a tapestry of shared experience and quiet happiness. By nightfall they would sit together on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one, the sky darkening into deep blue and black, and the wind rustling gently through the trees. Their hands entwined, their bodies close, the firelight flickering on their faces reflecting contentment and hope. They spoke little, knowing words were unnecessary, the presence of the other a testament to the life they had chosen to build, a life anchored in love, patience, trust, and shared purpose. As the weeks turned into months and months into years, Clara and Luke continued to grow together, navigating the seasons, the challenges, and the ordinary rhythms of life. Their bond became unshakable, a foundation strong enough to withstand any trial and tender enough to nurture joy and intimacy. They built not only a home but a life, a world where love was expressed in small gestures, quiet conversations, and the steady rhythm of daily companionship. The sun set slowly behind Red Mesa, painting the hills in shades of gold, pink, and purple. Clara rested her head against Luke's shoulder, her hand in his, and felt the steady warmth and comfort of his presence. The journey from duty to love, from uncertainty to certainty, from fear to contentment had been long, yet every step had been meaningful. Each day they shared strengthened their connection and affirmed the choice they had made to face the world together as partners, companions, and lovers. The night settled softly around the house, the stars shining brightly above and the river glinting in the distance. Clara and Luke sat quietly, embracing the life they had created, a life built deliberately with care, patience, and love, a life together where every day was a new beginning, a continuation of trust and devotion, and a promise that the bond they had forged would endure through all seasons and all challenges, carrying them forward in a shared journey of love and companionship.